Good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It is a glorious Wednesday. Mischaela is going to be joining me. She is having a small bit of technical difficulties right now, which totally happens in this era. So I'm going to start the conversation off with some stuff that really was just going to be me talking anyway. So she gets to kind of miss out on sitting through that, I guess. So yeah, when I see that she is ready to come back in, I'll bring her back in. But tonight, yeah, it's going to be a joint discussion. So I'll first just start by, if it's your first time streaming with me and you don't know who I am, my name is Janey Brown. I am a professional singer, a coach of over 15 years, and I have a company called Fierce Academy, which helps people manage their mental health, build self-confidence, and face their fears in usually sort of in the process of taking the next step in their life. So whether they're transitioning to a new job or transitioning out of an old relationship or taking a big risk in their careers, that is usually where people find me in their life. So that's a bit about me. You can sort of find out more about me through, my Instagram account, and in my bio, I have all kinds of links that you can check out, including my music and YouTube account and whatnot. So yeah, that's a bit about me. Mischaela will tell you more about her life when she gets on here. Mischaela and I actually go way back. We met each other I think in 2017, we traveled Costa Rica together and just became great friends ever since. We were leading retreats together. At the time, she was teaching Reiki. And then a while back, she transitioned into being a life coach. And that's what she does now. And obviously, you can see after what I just described about myself why we would relate so well. But on a personal level, she's just always been such a bright light and a hilarious being and just awesome to be around. So I'm super stoked for her to join in. I'm just going to double check my text, see if she's able. I think she's still working things out. So tonight we're talking about navigating spirituality in the modern era. It's a big subject because, there's a lot of stigmas and stereotypes that are associated with spirituality. Spirituality often gets confused with religion, which also has its own stereotypes and negative associations. So yeah, we're going to try to break that down, attempt to decode and demystify spirituality, and hopefully offer a better understanding of how you can implement it into your life if you see it as valuable. We'll challenge the controversy around it and clarify any misunderstandings, and even offer ideas on how you can include spirituality in your life, and what types of things you can do to do that. So I don't mind my eyes darting around here and there, just always checking in to see if she's ready to come in. I see her. Yay. Just in time. I just finished the little intro. All right. Yes, we did it. Is there sound? There's no sound. Why? Let's see here. Technical things, all the technical things. Let me just see if there's anything on my end I can do. You can hear me though? I wonder what is happening. Sorry guys, just give us a quick second here. I'm going to see if just on the audio side of things there's anything on my end. It doesn't look like it. If there's people there's obviously people that are present right now. If you could just in the chat box,
can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh my God. Okay. Here. I'm ready.
You did it, girl. You did it. It's honestly,
oh my God.
If only a few minutes, 7 minutes in, and yeah, you're good. You're good. It's all good. Everyone's here for this conversation tonight. It's a good one. It's a big one. It's a vulnerable one. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Let me just get settled. And Man, I'm sorry. It was a big day of momming. I just had to get new AirPod. Anyway, it's been a lot, but I'm here and
It's
I'm excited.
it's all good, honestly. Like, pumped to have you here, and it's really, really cool that we could do this, especially after our sort of, I was briefly describing our personal history of, on the wellness journey, leading wellness retreats and things like that, and then life kind of just took us into our own whirlwinds. You are married, you have a
It's been a
baby now.
whirlwind.
And we're like reconvening and re-entering each other's lives, which has just been such a delight. Why don't you just talk a little bit about, what you do and where you're at, and then we can jump into right into the difference between spirituality and religion to start the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes. Okay. Well, how do I capture that in a nutshell? What do I do and where am I at? Well, I am a personal growth coach, personal growth, development, leadership, and I'm actually in the phase of really shifting my business because I just had a baby, so I have a
Wow.
5-month-old at home right now, and so I've been doing one-to-one coaching for the last 4 years. I want to be shifting more into group coaching and and moving away from the one-on-one. But anyway, we'll get into that more, I'm sure. But this whole idea of spirituality has really been coming up for me a lot as I'm really taking a deep, hard look at my business, how I'm showing up in my business, and who I'm being in that. This is something that's been coming up for me, and this is where this all began. Was you and I having a conversation in our private lives about that topic, and here we are.
Yeah.
So that's all
Yeah.
I'll say for now, but I'm sure we'll get into more detail as we go on.
Yeah, definitely. And at the end, for sure, we'll make sure that everyone can find you, and you can maybe clarify some of your offerings and just share. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure that you're wide open and available for anyone that wants to be in touch with you. Yeah, same. I echo what you're saying in that, we're very public, public with our lives. We share a lot about vulnerability. We value authenticity and trying to, present our public self as accurately as possible pertaining to our
Yeah.
personal self. And you and I both came to the conclusion at the same time through that conversation that spiritually, we're highly spiritual people. We practice spirituality in all kinds of ways all the time. We value, universal source energy and, higher power and things like that. And we just never talk about it. We kind of came to the conclusion that we never talk about it publicly. And so we thought, why don't we just, we were kind of going back and forth with like 7-minute voice notes on all our ideas. So we're like, why don't we just turn this into a live discussion? Because there's probably a lot of other people, whether it be coaches or, just whoever that potentially feel the same, feel trepidatious about talking about spirituality or including it in their work and whatnot. And the cool thing about this conversation is, as best as possible, we're going to clarify the misunderstandings, the stereotypes, and the negative associations so that hopefully it can give, courage will need to be invoked to move forward on this journey, but like hopefully you'll feel a little bit more comfortable, whoever you are, right, to bring this into your professional self, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully I feel more comfortable.
Me too. Yeah, that's kind of the main goal. This is us breaking the ice for ourselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyone listening, as always, feel free to include your insights, your thoughts, ask questions. We love when you do that. It's, a community conversation. Like, we're not here to say that we have the answers by any stretch. We're just offering ideas and working through it the same as everyone else. So yeah, want to hear your insights on this. This is a big topic. So let me just run through a little spiel on the, let's say the difference between religion and spirituality. And obviously you chime in whenever, if there's burning things, and then we can move right into like, what does spirituality mean to us personally? So I'll keep this as concise as possible because this isn't like a history lecture or whatever, but, by and large, religion is different than spirituality in that it has a specific or contains a specific set of organized beliefs and practices, usually shared by a collective or a group, and usually or commonly institutionalized. The pros to that are that like you can practice spirituality or religion with a community, which can help add to consistency of that practice. The cons are that because it's governed by an institution, that can create the opportunity for abuse of power. And that can unfortunately stain the actual valuable teachings, which is really unfortunate because there's many valuable teachings in religion itself. It's just sometimes murked by the people distributing the information, or let's say the organizations distributing the information.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my understanding about religion by and large. If you have anything that comes to mind for you, like, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, you captured it. Like, the words that came to mind are community, like that's certainly a benefit. And there being sort of an organized structure for people to just follow, because
Right.
sometimes that's easier. That's, simple. Our mind likes simplicity, right? So it's like,
Totally.
okay, these are the steps, boom, all right, I'll do that. But then, like, and yeah, of course, there's real wisdom in all religions that, again, has been
Right.
at times contaminated by humankind.
Right. By the flawed humans that we are.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love that you said the word follow, because I have a little quote actually, after we quickly discuss, like, let's say that the how spirituality differs, that I think will go along with what you just said. So spirituality differs from religion in that it's more of an individual practice. There's no rule book, there's no formula. No one person or organization can claim it as its own and call it one thing. And if people do, they're sort of like missing the point of spirituality. Like, if there's anyone out there that's like, this is the right way to do it and this is the wrong way to do it, like, you're missing the point of spirituality and your own personal spiritual journey and spiritual growth, like, in my opinion. So it's, yeah, to summarize that, it's an inward devotion with the potential use of external resources, but it's an internal devotion rather than a devotion to like an organization and sort of these, like, as you said, like a system that you can follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if there is anyone out there saying, like, I know the way, this is the way, you might be in a cult.
Yeah, yeah, right. For
Like,
sure.
they might end up being a cult leader. So yeah.
Yeah, and like, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, no disrespect. Like, I just want to be clear. Like, we're not saying that one is better than the other. Like, we just listed the pros and cons of religion, and there's pros and cons of spirituality too. The pros of spirituality are pure autonomy. You get to govern yourself on your spiritual journey. The cons could be lack of community and therefore a lack of consistency, right? So there's pros and cons to both. There's no negativity, but yeah, like, there are also, religions and even spiritual practices can turn into cult-like structures that can take you down a rabbit hole, which is not ideal. So you have to watch for that. And definitely we can get into some more of that as we go along here, with, like, some red flags to watch out for. So I'm going to read this quote, and then let's dive in. I want to ask you a question about what spirituality means to you. So Japanese poet hold on for a sec. Matsuo Bashao. I'm so sorry for everyone that actually speaks Japanese, or kanji, or whichever sort of language specifically that is in. I just butchered that, and I apologize. But this quote has been really powerful, and honestly, it's affected me for a lot of my life on my own spiritual journey. And he says, I believe it's a he, they say, do not seek to follow in the footsteps of the wise, seek what they sought. And I feel like that really, for me, encompasses spirituality. You're not trying to follow anyone. And frankly, a real leader understands that their job isn't to make you follow them. It's to make you seek the leader within.
Yes.
Yeah.
Find it for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes me, I mean, I could go down a lot of different ways, so just reel me in here, but it makes me think about when I first found a connection to spirituality. For me personally, like, my spiritual journey began through Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. I was in a yoga class, and the teacher read a quote. I don't even remember what it is. This is over 10 years ago now, but it just landed. It struck me, and I was like, I want more of that. and that was sort of the gateway into it. And I just got so curious, like, what do these people know that I don't, or like, what are they experiencing? What is that? What's the magic there that I'm here and I want to be there? How do I get there? So yeah, that
Totally. I
led to
love
a whole long journey of seeking that's not over yet.
right, and never will be, apparently, from what the the wise people say. I love that you just mentioned Eckhart Tolle. I think that he is one of the most influential spiritual leaders of our time, and just so much value to offer. And I'm super excited to talk about the ego later in this discussion, because I feel like he's it's just cool to know that even he has an ego and owns that, and which solidifies the fact that the ego is not evil, which we'll get into. But because spirituality is so personal, we just described the difference between religion and spirituality. Let's get into what spirituality means to us. Like, what does spiritual growth mean to us? And if you would like to, I'd love you to start with that. Easy to answer, right?
Yeah. All right, let me just sum this up here. What does spirituality mean? What does spiritual growth mean to me? I suppose it's about recognizing that I am not my thoughts, recognizing that I am not my job title, I am not my skin color, I'm not my relationships, I'm not my age, I'm something beyond that. So it's about really stripping all of these identity labels away, and connecting with that pure awareness that exists within.
Love that.
Yeah. I'll stop there because I could go on.
Well, and I'm sure whatever arises as we go on, like, feel free to share. And anyone, again, who's watching tonight, please feel free to offer what spirituality means to you. Like, we're all figuring this out together. For me, I feel like what my, let's say, definition thus far is kind of echoes what you're saying. Like, I love your sort of, the way I'm interpreting what you just expressed is that you're sort of detaching from identity and sort of more connecting to, let's say, inner core essence or spirit. And this is my language, but
yeah,
which is, it's kind of similar, I'd say, to what my definition is in my language. It's going beyond my own self-interest and I think to do that, to go beyond your self-interest, you kind of have to detach from your identity, because if you're holding your identity as so precious and you're in love with it, then how do you go beyond that to expand? So it's I think for me, like, going beyond my own self-interest and having trust in a higher power, or like a deeper inner wisdom. And I would add that it's a constant quest a constant quest into the unknown and into that expansive space beyond my identity, without rest. And I want to clarify, when I say a constant quest into the unknown without rest, I'm not saying that you always need to, like, that it's always about being in a grind, that it's always about, striving and in a space of action. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about no rest pertaining to not deciding to rest in a conclusion, and rather being willing to remain in the essence of the question. Like, as
so
humans,
continual seeking, not being like, all right, I've figured it out, I'm done now, I've arrived, like, it's over.
Totally. As humans, we seek certainty and therefore answers, and that's part of our survival structure. There's no disrespect, there's no negativity, right? But as soon as we rest in an answer, we've potentially paused the forward movement of expansiveness beyond that conclusion. So yeah, it's this concept of not resting in an answer or a conclusion, which is very hard to do. And I
and be like, all right, I figured it out. I'm done.
Yeah, like, I don't have any that mastered at all.
Yeah.
And P.S. Remember, like, for any of you critical thinkers out there, and I'm here for you. Remember, we're talking about spirituality and not math, right? Like, math has objective truths, spirituality doesn't. If we try to solidify an objective truth around spirituality, it's no longer a quest. Whereas with math, it's like the goal is to find an objective truth. So that's why I think that it's important to describe it that way in the context of spirituality, where I would never describe it that way in the context of math. Like,
So that brings up a question. So then what is the point? Like, why seek?
I guess if the thesis of spirituality is growth, then the only way you can keep growing or expanding is to not rest in the conclusion, which essentially puts the expansiveness on pause. I'm not saying that like finding an answer and rest like and being okay with an answer stops your growth.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. There's probably all kinds of ways we're growing all the time and don't know it, right? But I guess it's to say if the goal is going beyond self-interest, then I don't know that there's a lot of room for going like, and now I've sort of figured it out,
Mm-hmm.
and period, or like
Mm-hmm.
conclusion. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of always, even when there is a conclusion, it might be something like, here's the conclusion for now because I need to take a rest. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but
I always
getting
think
back
of
to,
the metaphor of like climbing the mountain. Like the way I just view life is like you're climbing the mountain, you want to get to the top so you can just see it all, right? See the whole view from the top. And there's times where you just gotta like chill on a plateau for a few minutes,
yes,
like catch your breath, like be like, this is a nice view, right? And then
totally.
you're like, all right, I'm ready to climb again. Like, what's it look like from up there?
Right.
And I wasn't, just to clarify, I wasn't contesting you. I was actually curious, like,
No,
what
and
is?
to- totally. And I appreciate the question because if you're thinking it, someone else probably will. And I definitely didn't feel like you were contesting me. And even if you were like, cool, like let's
Yeah.
figure it
Let's
out.
get into it.
um, but yeah, like I like that you asked that question because I really do want to nail down that I'm not suggesting like don't rest. It sounds exhausting to like always exist in the unknown and in the question, right? Like I guess it's like even in the answer, let's say, or even in the conclusion, if there's rest there, it's the willingness to be like, I'm resting, but only for a short time. Like this is not, it's not like, and now I'm figured it out forever and this is who I am now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this is where I'm at now. And like I intend to, the intent is to continue expanding beyond that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ryan just wrote, for me, spirituality means forgiveness, happiness, freedom on a good day, he says. Fair enough. I love
Yeah.
the idea of forgiveness. I think that's a very good
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some other words that come up for me around it are surrender, acceptance, uh, peace, content, fulfillment. These are all reasons why I stay on the climb, stay on the path.
Totally. Purpose, meaning, even, right?
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
For sure.
Yes, of course, purpose and meaning. Yes.
I love all those words that you
Yeah.
just said. Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, love that. Um, okay, so we just clarified from our perspective that spirituality is a personal practice and there is no right or wrong answer. Like and essentially if you come across individuals who say there is a right or wrong answer, like
They're cult
they're
leaders.
yeah, yeah, right. Run for the hills. But kind
Red
of
flag.
like, but kind of, it's like it is a red flag. Like if someone's sort of standing there saying like, I know the way for sure, and like
Mm-hmm.
if they try to create objective truths for spirituality, like that's missing the point of spirituality. Like spirituality isn't objective, it's subjective, unlike math, right? So let's get into the challenging the stereotypes, because I feel like that's a good segue into that. There are people that are like this. With respect to spirituality, it can be intimidating to associate yourself with it and talk about it, because people connect it to someone who's not grounded or new age, or
Mm-hmm.
and new age isn't a bad word. It's just to say that new age can be associated with like woo woo. We've talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and some of it is unmerited, like, you know, hardcore critical thinkers, scientists who only believe in science, like they'll say, you know, well, it can't be disproven by science, so it's just not worth kind of my time or whatever. And that's fine. They're allowed to think that. I don't believe that every single thing has to be, you know, proven or disproven by science in order to believe that it can be real. And that might, you know, that kind of also might be
Or
a different.
proven yet, right?
Yes, that too. Well, that too, exactly. And we're definitely going to get into like things
Like
that
we don't know everything that there is to know, like as a collective, as humanity. Like think of what
yeah,
we thought we knew once, and we're constantly disproving what we know scientifically. So,
for sure,
you know,
for sure. Even in the field of spiritual practices, which is going to be real fun to talk about, because, you know,
mm-hmm.
long time ago, mindfulness meditation was thought to be kind of kooky, and here we are in
Yeah,
science, full blown committed. So,
yeah,
um, so I think it's like with these types of stereotypes, right? And if you can think of any more, that what like, let me ask you, like what is your fear with being,
okay.
yeah, with being associated with spirituality?
It's so funny because all the things that I think of, I'm like, I don't know, just like someone who's like kooky,
Yeah.
like dancing in the woods with crystals and reading their tarot cards, which I do all of the above. That is me. But for some reason, I feel like I've got to hide that. I got to keep that separate from my business. People won't take me seriously. But some of the times where I felt most free is when I'm like dancing in the woods
Right.
with my crystals with some sage, like, you know, and it's yeah, the I think, like you said, the stereotype is like they're not grounded.
Right.
They're um yeah, they're not critically thinking, or they're
Hmm.
not,
Hmm.
they're just going to believe whatever, you know, the next trend is, or whatever the case may be.
Totally.
um and you and I have discussed, like, whereas, well, I don't know if we want to get there yet.
Well,
All right, I'll say it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Both of us are really interested in the place where like science and spirituality
Yes.
meet, right? Because we are both very much critical thinkers. We're both very curious, and that's sort of what led me to spirituality, is like just questioning why, like, how did these people, you know, have this peace and this fulfillment and these full expansive lives, and then these people over here do not, and what's the difference, and like, let me figure this out, you know, like what's going on here. And that led me into things like meditation, mindfulness, mindset, observing your thoughts, all of this, which then led me, you know, my goodness, down a lot of rabbit holes. Like I've you know, I've read the books, I've done the
Right.
retreats, I've gone, you know, I've gone down YouTube rabbit holes, you know, and into, like, I don't know, time space and string theory and
Right.
membrane theory,
Quantum
you know,
physics.
like,
Yeah.
yes, like, right.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for sure.
that's where it, so that's when it's like, oh, now
Right.
it's starting to connect,
Right.
like science and spirituality starts to connect, and you start to see patterns in all of these sort of ancient belief systems versus what science is discovering now, versus what neuroscience is discovering, like, not versus, connected to, layered on. It's like, okay, now there's a story emerging, and that's where I get really curious.
Totally. And I'm with you on that. I'm a big fan. Okay, here's what's interesting. As you were saying that, first of all, me too. I thrashed my way through a ton of content and a ton of practices and
Mm-hmm.
devoted myself, you know, to a ton of different things that I now look back on and are sort of like, okay, that was actually a bit of a cult. Like, you know, but whatever, I needed to submerge myself in order to like figure it out in there, and now I'm on the other side of it
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But yeah, like I think it's common when people are going on a journey to sort of thrash through the woods and, you know, like,
I love that imagery.
yeah, me too, like machete through the bush, like,
Pretty
you know.
much. I
And
did go to like the jungles of Peru to
right, yeah,
figure things out.
yeah, I'm sure you're not alone on that. And so yeah, whatever, I think it's normal, and like, and but it's interesting as you were so, you know, me too, but as you were talking about what, you know, what, how science spirituality, how, when as that's emerging, how that's really interesting to you. I thought, me too. I'm super stoked about the fact that science is now catching up to sort of what some of these meditators have been, have known for thousands and thousands of years. And then I did a miniature self-reflection on why I'm excited about it. And there's a part of me that wonders if I'm only I love science. And frankly, the more I learn scientifically, the more I believe in a higher power, because I'm just this, who thought of this? When you learn
It's
about
way too well organized. It's all
seriously,
just miraculous.
I was talking to Alex last night about the anatomy of the vagina. It's literally mystical. It's just
I grew a human with my body. I had nothing to do with it. I was just there.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
And childbirth aside, just bodies in general, you learn
right.
about how it all fits together and how all these systems and nature and the animals on this planet,
the trees, the fungi,
yes, the mycelium.
Insane. The documentary with Paul, I think is Paul Stamets on Netflix is, I didn't get to watch the whole thing.
Fantastic fungi. Yeah.
Incredible example of just the mysteries of the world and how that kind of came about. But it's, so I guess to complete the thought, it's so on one hand, the more I learn about science, the more I'm blown away. And I actually see, especially learning about cell biology, I see that as a spiritual practice to some degree. But then the other part of me is well, I wonder if I'm so excited about, or a part of me is so excited about science merging with spirituality, is because I feel more secure in saying I'm spiritual, because now it's backed by science.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's valid. Yeah.
It's right. It's like a security blanket in a way. So, and definitely I'm stoked to get in more into the conversation around science. Before we move on to that, I do want to say, I want to just talk a little bit more about the red flags within the spiritual realm, because I think that that's really important to talk about. And I think it's also a thing that derails people in the same way that potentially organized religion, if the person that's distributing the information is seeking power, in the same way that would turn someone away from those teachings, I think some of the people in the spiritual realm could turn someone away from spirituality. So I definitely want to talk about that. Before I do, I just want to ask Warren if he can clarify what spiritual pain means. I've actually never heard of that term. So I'm just interested to hear more of your thoughts on what you're asking so that we can speak to it, or share your thoughts on what you know about it. So we just described, stereotypes, not being grounded, woo-woo, things like that, new agey people. I think the fear for me in being associated with that is not so much that, Alex and I, if she's even on here, we talk all the time about how we'll have dance parties in my living room where we're just it's almost not even dance. We're just let me follow my body's lead, and we're just doing the most ridiculous movements, laughing our heads off, but it feels so good because we're just letting the body lead the way. And it's the thing about that is that it's a tool, right? We're not claiming that that's what spirituality is. And I think that in some instances where these stereotypes, where let's say spirituality gets a bad rap, is people who, let's say, dance in the woods with crystals or whatever, which sounds fucking awesome, by the way. But it's people that do that, they get an ego around it. And it's well, this is what real, you know what I mean? This is spiritual. And people that don't resonate with that are well, fuck, I'm out. You know what I mean? So I think what to pay it, maybe what to pay attention to is less about what the person is saying, in terms of they've cracked the code, and more, well, what's the tool, even if the person is sort of the stereotype of a woo-woo person that's not grounded, try to seek the tool that they're using and seek the information around that tool. Kind of like the quote said earlier, don't seek to follow those people, seek what they sought. Why is dancing freely, why is that healing? Why might that be healing to them? And why might that be healing to me? Let me try it out, right? Versus,
make me just want to do it right now.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Like I see dancing as like fast stretching. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I just love it. Just feels so
like
good. It's such
ooh,
a great trauma release. Like because your
yeah,
body's just like, cool, I'm the boss here. Like, yeah,
yeah.
we're not gonna contort ourselves so we can look cool. Like I'm just gonna like do ridiculous things.
Do things that feel good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. So it's like I think, one way you can mitigate the stereotype, or one way you can, as a, let's say you're new on your spiritual practice or you're trying to enhance it, forget what forget the people that are saying, follow me, I've got the answers, and like you need to buy 60 crystals to figure it out and to like protect yourself against evil spirits. Forget that and seek what they sought. Why
Hmm.
do they think, like, and is that useful for me? Right. And if it's
Hmm.
not, what's the next thing I can think about doing?
Hmm.
The other thing I want to say, I mean, and okay, and therefore, PS, before I move on to this part, is like, we then as spiritual questers have to have courage to just know that we're going to be associated with the worst of the stereotypes of this sort of field. And I would offer, just like, we're going to all be judged either way, period. You might as well do the thing that's true to you then.
Yeah, yeah. And this idea of like the crunchy granola spiritual person, um, is it's so not the case, because spirituality nowadays can look as different as each individual, right? Like every individual can practice in their own way. And if that's like
Right.
listening to gangster rap and smoking doobies and that's what does it for you, like great, you know? And like, and if it's dancing woods, great. And if it's, just standing outside and breathing the fresh air, great. If it's,
Catching snowflakes on your tongue.
yes, like whatever it is that just allows you to just feel connected with your essence and quiets the chatter of the mind and allows you to just feel present in this moment and just be in your senses, in your awareness without any judgment, then that's spirituality to me.
Yeah,
Like,
totally, totally. Because if you're in that state of observation and connectedness without judgment, that to me seems like it's going beyond your self-interest. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Like it is setting the identity and the ego aside to just be
Be.
present. Yeah. And it feels good. It feels super good.
Yeah.
It can also feel really scary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just read a comment here, and then I want to talk about people that use spirituality to manipulate. Nicole Guza says, hi, Nicole. Check out Bruce Lipton if you haven't already. He's a biologist notable for his views on epigenetics. Epigenetics is a very fascinating subject. It's
Mm-hmm.
connected
Mm-hmm.
to it's essentially connected to gene expression from a generational standpoint. I am definitely not an expert on that. It's something I've barely dipped my toe in, so I won't even try to go further in explaining that. But it's incredible what they're discovering with epigenetics, and relational trauma, and the healing around generational trauma. Sorry, generational trauma and the healing of generational trauma. He's a scientist and a spiritual, she says. I've heard him speak multiple times in India, and he's incredible. So that's something to think about
Mm.
for those of you who are listening. Bruce Lipton, and it's like Lipton, like the soup, just for spelling context. Um, I can't say that he's involved with the soup though. Just to clarify, just specific. Um, so okay, it's not great, these negative stereotypes and sort of cringe sort of worthy archetypes in the spiritual realm or field suck. But what's even worse is there's actually people that use spirituality and the mask of spirituality to manipulate. And I have many anecdotal stories of friends who like didn't see it coming in toxic relationships, whether it be friendships or romantic relationships, didn't think to set boundaries because the person's they like kind of assumed the person was good because the person practices yoga or like teaches meditation or collects crystals or uses the word chakra, right? Beware. And I'll say on a grander scheme, and I'd love to hear if you have any examples of times this has happened to you where you kind of checked yourself and went, oh, I really missed the red flag there because I just assumed, spiritual meant good. But I mean, like a great example on a large scale is we just point to the Bikram documentary, right? Like if you're looking for evidence of do people use the mask of spirituality to manipulate, watch the
Mm-hmm.
Bikram documentary, right?
Yeah, or like the leader of the Shambhala community. which is a big story around here in Halifax where I am. Yeah, it's just like, oh God, another story of a man in power of some sort of spiritual movement abuse, just
Yeah.
trying to get his dick sucked, you know? It's like,
Oh my God. Oh man, that's so good. It's so good because it's so, I mean, it's so human and primal, but like really inappropriate and totally abusive power. Like,
just
you know,
super gross. Yeah. Or
awful.
like Keith Veneri, like, or Ranieri, or Nexium, the Nexium guy.
I don't even know if I know this story.
Oh, girl, there's a rabbit hole you can go down.
Okay.
I'll share links with you after. It was a self-improvement group that he had people call him Vanguard,
Okay.
right? Like, and he was the leader, and everyone had to, like, you know. Anyway, or did you watch Wild Wild Country? Osho.
No.
Anyway, the list goes on.
Right. Basically what I'm
You
hearing is there's bad people everywhere,
know.
and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you have to use discernment. You have to be connected to self. You have to be connected to your own sense of like navigating humans, right? Like there's bad humans in every industry. There's bad
Mm-hmm.
psychologists, there's bad spirit yogis, there's, you know, bad business people, bad lawyers, but there's also great people everywhere as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
Meaning like throw the bathwater out, like get, you know,
But hang on to that baby. And it's also like, maybe they're bad for you, right? Not everything
True.
is a fit, and so it's finding what really resonates for you, like what feels the way like your favorite song feels. Like that's, you know, and what feels like dissonance, like there's something wrong here, like my spidey senses are tingling, like or my gut is clenching, like something there's a no feeling here, like listen to that.
Right.
Like
Right.
there's
Exactly.
information for you there.
Just a feeling of overall contraction. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the sinking feeling. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. I love that you just said that. And I love that you put it into words of how it could feel in the body. I'm going to read a comment. Ike says, I'm late, but what's the definition of spirituality this conversation is based on? Um, Love that question. Let's give everyone a reminder. I mean, overall, what we've said is sort of that there is no definition of spirituality because it's personal. Spirituality can't be claimed or owned by any one person or institution or organization and called anything. In fact, if there's someone that claims that there's a right or wrong way to spirituality, they sort of miss the point of spirituality. It can look like a lot of things. It can deploy many different tools. Um, it's neither good nor bad and both at the same time, right? Like it's really up to you to create that definition. And for Mischaela and well, I'll speak for myself, and then you can remind people what you said. But for me, I basically said that it's the willingness to go beyond your own self interest, to grow and to serve others. Um, it's this connection to a higher or a deeper inner wisdom, which I kind of feel are the same things. This inner God, or this, yeah, this
Inner divinity,
inner
your
divinity.
essence. Yeah.
And for me, it's the willingness to never rest in any conclusion. And I went into a whole rant about like, I don't mean you're always hustling. I mean you haven't concluded at any point in your life that you've cracked the code and that's it now. You can rest, but in the place of rest, sort of have the intent of, I'm now going to rest, and then I'll continue my quest when I have more energy and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Remaining open to
yes,
more information coming in.
exactly. And I mean, if you remember what you said, feel free to, um, you,
Well, I guess I said detaching from the identity,
yeah,
all of the markers of, you know, our age, our gender, our job, our relationships, detaching from all of these things that we identify with, and just connecting with that essence of who we are, that that just pure awareness, that place
right.
of pure awareness.
Yeah, love that, and love how you went through the listings of like, I'm not my job, I'm not my race, I'm not my uh, role as a mother or a wife. Like I loved all of that. It's because that is the only way to sort of detach from identity and connect to your essence, is to say, well, what are all the roles that I think I am? Let me not
Because
be
those all
that.
can change, right?
Totally,
So if those can
totally.
change, then what's left when you take all that away? What's still
Exactly.
there?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that's coincidentally, Ike is he's a football coach in the CFL, and I'm sure he's aware of the dilemma of the process of professional athletes retiring and the loss of identity that occurs there. It's a real crisis, actually, in the sports industry. I don't think it's talked about enough, and it should be. Like there is a thing that happens when you retire, and it happens for everyone retiring from any job, right? But professional athletes specifically, because there's so much pressure and weight and dream, and it's like the stakes are just so high. So when they retire or they get injured and cut, like they can go through a real big mental health crisis because of that.
Well, that's why so many people. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your
I
thought.
was going to say that's why so many people seek coaching when they're in times of transition, because they want to shift from one
Right.
career to another, or they want to shift from, or they've ended a relationship, or they want to be in a relationship, or whatever the case may be. And when they're sort of shedding this one layer of identity, that's when you're in the unknown. That's when it's like, ah, like,
Right.
what am I if I'm not a hairstylist? Like, if,
For sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah.
and so it's really helpful to have some guidance through that that uncertainty and that unknown. Or like when people are performing and they're being judged, they're placing themselves in a public space where they're open to the thoughts of others, the judgments of others, it could be said. And that's like, again, our ego attaching to our identity. What will they think of my singing, my speaking, my whatever the case
For
may
sure.
be?
For sure. And I'm super stoked to get into the conversation about ego as well. Like that's I have that actually next. I see it next on my list here, just on the side, because there's such a tendency to when we talk about detaching from the identity, we're not saying eradicate the ego, and there's a really good reason for that. We actually need our ego. It's really healthy to have an ego. And so we'll definitely dive into that. I want to address some of the things that Ike said as well. And yeah, I love what you're saying. I love everything you just said about like, when the roles get stripped away, what's left, and we all have these roles that we've sort of assigned to ourselves, and it's not it's like it can hurt us, it can cause suffering when we lose those roles, but it's also not negative that we've assigned those roles in the first place, because we need them to navigate through this life. Ike says, what do we call good and bad when pertaining to spirituality? And just to briefly review, um, good is what feels good to you, let's say, to summarize on that quest, and bad is, I guess, what doesn't. We kind of discussed some negative stereotypes associated in our field of people who are not grounded and who sort of are convinced that they've cracked the code, and try to sort of get you to follow their approach. But we all know that, or at least leaders and coaches know that, a sign of a true leader is to not have it's to not have people follow you, but to have people discover their leader within, essentially, or the coach within. So a bad example of someone in the spiritual field is someone who uses the mask of spirituality to manipulate. And yeah, we talked about how you really have to be aware of these red flags, because people just assume, right? If someone goes to church or if someone practices their yoga, that they're potentially just a good person, and it's not actually, that's not true. People of all walks of life manipulate and abuse their power, and we listed Bikram as being one good example of that. Ike says, how do we find out who we are to get on the path to pursue of who and what to become? And I mean, there's probably a million different ways that question could be answered. Maybe, Ike, if you could clarify, do you mean in like, maybe just refine that question or reiterate that question and just see if, do you mean in on the quest of spirituality, or do you mean like literally in life, like as a career? Ike, by the way, I don't want to share his story because I don't know actually how public he is about things. Actually, okay, I'll share what I know he is public about, which is he shares scriptures from, I think it's the Bible. I'm not sure which Bible. And honestly, everything he shares, I always resonate with. And this goes back to our conversation earlier, which is if people have a resistance to religion, more often than not, from my understanding, it's usually because they are associating the religion with the obtrusive, power thirsty person who maybe taught them those teachings. Like we all know, right? We all know at this point in the West, religion has had institutions which have abused their power and have hurt people. There's also institutions that are brilliant and amazing, but ultimately the institution is different than the teaching. And we try to kind of refine that and say, like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Seek these teachings. These teachings are really valuable. And anyway, Ike shares these teachings and has also prayed for me on a couple different occasions, I think, like when I was really struggling. And it's just been, it was just so incredibly helpful. So I just wanted to point that out. Like he's really a great example of someone who, and I don't know if this is right, Ike, but like I am assuming that you follow a religion. It's not just that you're taking scriptures and sharing them, but it's like an actual, you actually follow the religion. And if that's true, which I think it is, you're a great example of someone who is who has a healthy understanding of these teachings, who shares them in a healthy way. Like you're not obtrusive, you're not forceful. You're just saying, here's the wisdom that I've been helped by. Here's how you can look at it in a practical way. And here's how to like share that in a healthy way rather than like in a forceful way. So I really respect you and appreciate you for that.
As an offering, as an invitation.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So let's chat ego. This is such a big.
Where do we begin?
So I first want to say that when we talk about ego tonight, it's just forget the Freud association. Like we're not talking about the ego and how it pertains to the superego and id. Freud's theory is it has its purpose, but that's not the definition for tonight. I want to say that like despite the common instinct to eradicate the ego, especially in the spiritual realm, it's actually counterproductive to your own spirituality to do so because your ego is connected to your survival structure, which helps you stay alive. And so to fight your ego or to eradicate your ego, you're only fighting what it means to be human. And
well, wait, what do you define ego as you mean it?
Okay, fair enough. So ego is part of the personality structure, and actually in certain circumstances you could argue that it interchangeable with the personality. So if we're talking about our core essence, you could say that ego and identity and personality are sort of intermeshed. I feel like there's probably a broad description of all three of those. So I don't want to assume that I'm the one to like refine all three of those. But ego is it's a structure that helps us stay alive. It is a strong sense of I. It is a strong sense of self, right? And let me just continue to say there's nothing negative about any of that. In fact, the Dalai Lama himself says that that is healthy and appropriate for
well, we
human.
need it to exist in society, to exist in the world, to move around our day.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we're just like, a mad person riding naked in the street, like,
Right. Which if you have people to take care of
terrifying.
you, totally, yeah. If you have people to
like different experiences I've had where the ego dissolves, and it's terrifying when you're just like, who am I? What am I? Like
right.
we need that for, identity is important to interact with one another and to be able to go to the grocery store and organize our thoughts and keep things, structured in some sort of way.
100%. You just nailed it. I love that everything you just said. It's exactly my point. Like to literally navigate this plane, this earth, this city, this household, this way of being as a society, we need identity and structure. And ego sense that's connected to our survival, so that we can not only survive from an actual staying literally alive, but also survive the environment, like, and
Mm-hmm.
not be completely alienated from society because we don't know how to we don't have social skills or whatever. And you could argue that there are different spiritual leaders who have had these initiations, and there's sort of, there's stories of, I can't remember their name right now, but like the story of the Buddha sitting on the rock, who can be fed LSD and nothing changes because he's literally just, it's just spirit, but he also can't feed himself, or he has to be taken care of. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and that's an anecdotal sort of story. Like, I don't have any references. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere, but it's just to sort of create a metaphor for the fact that, as much as pure spirituality and pure alignment with spirit is a good goal, it's not necessarily the goal. It's like, that's cool if that happens or whatever, and if it happens, it'll probably happen to you.
Well,
Um,
and a lot of these, then I think of like Eckhart Tolle, who sat on a park bench for 2 years, or like Richard
right,
Dawkins, who wrote Power versus Force, who just like meditated for hours and hours and hours because it was so blissful. He never wanted to do anything else. And eventually,
right,
or like Guru, the Indian guru that sits on the mountaintop, again,
yeah,
anecdotal, but like,
yeah, yeah.
that they just sit there and like in a state of pure being, but like we can't all do that.
It's
Some of
well,
us have to like pay the bills and feed our child and whatever the case may
right.
be, right?
And it's not necessarily like for the highest will that we all do. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, that isn't, even though that serves its purpose, it's not necessarily the goal for us as a society. Like, there's this parable that always comes to mind when this subject comes up, and I love it so much. It's, very long story short, it's a disciple and a master, and it's rooted in Zen Buddhism. The parable, there's a disciple and his master, and the disciple goes to his master and says, master, oh, and by the way, they believe in that orientation that that meditation can surpass different lifetimes. So you won't have to come back to earth as much and, struggle as a human being, kind of thing.
Yeah, you
Um,
transcend to some other dimension, and I'm with you. I'm just looking for something because I
oh,
want to
fair
read
enough.
a
I
quote
thought
as
I
well.
thought maybe the baby was entering frame. Um,
No, I'm just looking at it. I've got my bookshelf here.
Yeah, fair enough. So
Yeah.
so the disciples like, okay, master, if I meditate for, an hour a day, um every single day in isolation, how many lifetimes would I surpass? And the master says, possibly 10,000. And the disciples like, okay, well, what if I meditate every single day for 10 hours a day, for 10 years? How many lifetimes would I surpass? And the master says, possibly 10,000. And the disciple's like, well, how does that work out? I just said if I meditated for just an hour a day for a year, and you told me that that would be 10,000 lifetimes that I'd surpass. But if I did 10 years, it would be potentially the same amount of lifetimes. So what's happening here? And basically the master was like, the point of life, or rather spiritual growth, doesn't just happen in meditation. It happens by engaging with life.
Hmm.
So we can find spiritual growth from, let's say, a tool like meditation or through prayer, but we also have to engage with human beings and face ourselves and grow that way to grow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Therefore, it
Right.
shouldn't be a goal to be like completely initiated and stunned on a mountain
Mm-hmm.
drooling, right?
Yeah. Just awash in the bliss of being.
Yeah.
And that comes back to this idea of like beyond service to self. There's such a service to others component to spirituality, in my view, because of the idea of like the collective consciousness, because of the idea. I love the idea of the metaphor of like a disco ball, like the collective consciousness is a disco ball, and we're all just, individual little panes of this,
That's cool.
right? We're all just a different facet of the disco ball. And so therefore, yeah, like you said, we're all mirrors of each other, and there's so much that we could notice about a human, but that which really sticks with us is where the learning is, right? So it's like if
Mhm.
somebody is
Yeah,
um upsetting you or in some way or annoying you or generally there's something in you that needs looking at in terms of it needs some healing, or there's a part of you that is like that you haven't fully come to accept yet. Um and we
totally.
can't experience that if we're not out in the world connecting with people. Being in relationships brings up a lot
That's
of
right.
shit, like work colleagues, brings up a lot of shit, like having children, or
Right.
parents, your parents, like anytime we're kind of in any sort of close and vulnerable relationship, there's just so much growth available.
100%. Honestly, it's Psych 101. Like, we're a social species. Social behavior and social psychology is here for a reason, right? It's like if we weren't meant to grow through other people, we would just be there'd be one person on earth. And obviously there's
Mm-hmm.
lots more than one person on earth. So, yeah, I mean, it's everything you just said makes so much sense, and it's so relevant and backs up the point of um us needing to engage with life to find spiritual growth, and therefore us needing an ego structure, which is basically embedded in our personality and connected to our survival structure, to navigate this social network that we're exposed to in various environments. Um, I love thinking about uh, when there's something I wrote down here that so when people try to like eradicate the ego, okay? And actually, I want to say this. I forgot to mention this. So it's like the ego is healthy. Literally, even the Dalai Lama says this quote. He goes, "A strong ego is." He goes, "It's a strong sense of self." Sorry, we as human beings require a strong sense of self to sacrifice ourselves for the benefit of others. So, on this notion of like altruism and service to others, there's sort of this interesting ideology that takes place around this, like everyone else before yourself type thing. And the Dalai Lama is even saying, yeah, but you actually need to have a really strong sense of self, i.e., the ego. He's defining the ego as a strong sense of I and a strong sense of self. Like, that's where I got the definition from. And he's saying that in order to like serve others, you sort of need to have a strong one, because otherwise you will get trampled on and abused and won't set boundaries, and like you will end up with all kinds of pain. So so it's necessary. It's necessary to have this ego structure to help us navigate. And when we try to I'm bouncing around a bit, but I want to say, okay, yes, but there is a situation where the ego is problematic, right? When someone it's often like when someone says like they have a big ego, it's often associated with someone who has like a really robust personality and who wants to one up someone all the time. And let's say even worse, wants to manipulate or
A
use
really
it.
inflated sense of self, like they're very
Yeah,
they think very highly of themselves, or
that's right. And when
in a
narcissists.
negative way.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. Because confidence is it's has similar traits, but it's different. And Dalai Lama was saying like when the strong sense of self is paired with really negative emotions, that is when the ego is destructive, and that's probably what people are referring to when they're talking about, let's say on the low end, someone who just has an inflated sense of self, but on the high end, hardcore narcissism. And narcissism, when that's part of the primary defense, a la it was constructed in the developmental years, it's kind of hard to deconstruct that. Like it's just part of a person. And, that's unfortunate because they probably too have opportunity to grow, but it's just trickier, right? But when a strong sense of narcissism or when narcissism isn't a hardcore primary defense for someone and it wasn't developed, because we all have narcissism, it's just to what degree. So when narcissism is a primary defense in the developmental years, and it's now that is the personality type, it's harder less opportunity to change and create a healthy ego. But when that's not the case, there's almost always an opportunity to create a healthy ego. And so that's what we need to be keeping in mind here, not eradicating the ego, but creating a healthy one. And, creating a healthy one doesn't mean, saying things like, I've risen above my ego. I no longer have an ego, right? It's like, that's the ego saying that, just FYI.
I think that when you say a healthy relationship with ego, I think about being able to observe the ego.
Right.
Right? So there's the
Totally.
ego, and then there's the self that is watching the ego do its thing, right?
Right.
And I think that's where it can be healthy. Like there's times where I'm in my ego, and then there's times where I pop out and I'm like, well, there I go.
Yeah.
There I go. I'm doing the thing, and I think
Yeah.
that's healthy. And I don't know, I'm not in psychology right now. I'm not working on a psychology degree, but from what I understand about narcissism is there is no separation between the ego and the self. Like they're
Right.
just so in it,
Yes.
they're not aware of it, and they're fully engaged and fully attached to that sense
Yeah.
of ego.
Yeah, it's thanks for sharing that and for putting it in those words. It's a great way to frame it. And it's that's what's so tricky about it, is that it's a defensive structure it was ultimately put in place to protect that human being in probably some pretty traumatic circumstances. However, because it's so intermeshed with the identity and with the personality structure, it protects,
remains unobserved.
it quite literally protects the person from being able to see it themselves, because that would deconstruct their defensive structure that actually kept them alive. So like,
Yeah.
it's a real pickle, and it's very frustrating to be around narcissists, because they can be very
Narcissism, it's a real pickle.
it really is.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's very frustrating because they're quite it's something to have compassion for, because that they were probably in such a problematic circumstance, by and large, that that is how hardcore they needed their defensive structure to be.
Absolutely.
To survive.
And that's the thing. Like I find anytime I encounter like a difficult person, I always have compassion, because I always think, what happened? What happened that led you to this place? And, hurt people, right? And then and just on the topic of ego, so in my coaching, the coach training I took through the Coactive Training Institute, they talk about your saboteurs, your inner saboteurs, the self-sabotaging behavior, which there's some overlap with ego there. And the whole idea of the saboteur is like these thoughts that are keeping you from doing the thing, because whatever the voice of the saboteur is, they'll judge you.
Right.
You might call it your inner critic, right?
Yes.
Or you need X, Y, and Z in order to feel B, do X, Y, and Z. So it's this running, unobserved commentary going on internally that is serving to protect you. It's serving to protect you from judgment, from rejection, from failure, from all of these things, right? So we can have compassion for the ego, and we can have compassion for our inner saboteurs or inner critic, because if we were to view the world through the eyes of the ego or the saboteur, we'll understand that they think their job is to protect us, right? Like this part of us thinks its job is to protect us. So if we don't do the scary thing, or if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, or if we don't, try something new that's out of the comfort zone, then we won't get hurt, right?
100%.
So just stay small, stay safe, stay in what you know. And so that's why like ego is valuable, because there are times where it saves us from danger or whatever the case may be. And then there's times where we're ready to evolve beyond it. Like we're able to observe it and say, hey, actually, I don't, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need that style of protection any longer. And I'm ready to like try the thing. I believe it's possible. Anyway.
Yeah, everything you just said, again, nailed it. Like that's very closely linked to my teachings as well. I use the term fear and I connect that to the survival structure, but fear, ego, survival structure, identity, like they're all closely linked, if not the same thing, for all I know, right?
Language.
Yeah, right. But it's like you're right. Like the inner critic, that's a mental manifestation of fear, you know, after perceiving a threat of a threat to your survival, whether it's real or not is
It's
irrelevant.
like the voice of the amygdala. Like,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the only way to I mean, from a physiological standpoint, there's obviously different tools to manage fear, such as belly breathing, and there's all kinds of things to manage fear. But from a inner critic standpoint, it really does have to come down to reasoning with it. Like, you don't try to fight it, you don't try to ignore it because it's just going to get louder. And if you fight it, you're just fighting what it means to be human. Because again, that inner critic is connected to our survival structure that alarms us of danger. But the only way is to, when you're actually not in danger, is to reason with it and say, like, I hear you, and as you said, but let's just do it this way this time, and like, I know you're not going anywhere, but today we're doing it this way,
Yeah.
so it's
You don't get to drive this time. You can sit in the back seat.
exact.
We're gonna put courage behind the wheel today.
You can sit in like the truck bed, not even the back seat, just the bed of the truck. I'm gonna read.
And just scream into the wind.
Yeah, exactly, because I can't hear you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read some of what he responded and clarified some of his questions, and it probably ties into what we're talking about, especially because I see that he said mindfulness here, and that's sort of the next part here as we get into the science of things. He says, "My question was, when we find out who we are, then we know who it is we need to pursue on our life journey. But that begins with finding out who we are. Where and how do we find out who we are?" Okay, I want to just process that. I'm going to read it again.
Can I say what comes up for me
Yes.
there?
Yes.
Something that's coming up for me is like when you say who we are, it's like often we're still looking for labels. We're still looking for another like identity
Yeah.
cloak, and who we are is not a job title or this or that. It's the essence of our being. It's like our awareness. It's our it's resonance. It's dissonance.
Right.
It's expansion. It's contraction. It's what lights us up, what brings us down, um, and, and following that, right? Follow that excitement. Listen to those instincts, and that can lead you to some answers.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah. So that's one thing that comes up.
I think I love the way you answered that. I think it's kind of alluding slightly to, like, do we really need to find out who we are to pursue forward, right? It's like, or is the act of faith, right, stepping out onto the way, and the way will appear, rather than
Mm-hmm,
let me sort of get my ducks in a row and then I'll step out onto the way. I
mm-hmm,
think it
mm-hmm.
I think it also, you could also look at it like, what I guess, like, what's the goal with um like, if you believe in the philosophy that there is no wrong answer to do life, which I do believe in that philosophy. I Kierkegaard actually, one of his teachings said something to the effect of, like, suffering is going to occur, like, regardless of what you do. Choose to have kids, don't choose to have kids, you'll suffer either way for different reasons, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just about figuring out what type of suffering is to your taste. And so if
Mm-hmm.
there's no wrong answer, then perhaps we don't need to get ducks in a row to move forward, because moving forward is just a constant process of discovery, of living in the unknown, of questing, and kind of all you need for that is your core essence, not necessarily your identity. We're all gonna construct our identity along the way. We cannot help it. We're just going to
Yeah.
do that. So if we're talking about who we are from an identity standpoint and from, like, an ego structure standpoint, and again, I don't mean ego in a negative sense. If we're talking about that, don't worry, that will come. We won't be able to help it. But I don't think we need that per se to move forward into the journey of the unknown, which is basically life. And that's the journey
Mm-hmm.
that we're all on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I
And
think about it.
another thing that comes up is this idea of your core values, right? So it's like if you start by just following those impulses, following like what lights you up, what brings you down, then you'll start to notice there's some like patterns here, and it's like, okay,
Right.
I feel really good when I'm being creative, or I feel
Right.
really really expansive when I'm connecting with people, or if I'm being playful, or if I'm growing, right? So like these are core. I just listed a bunch of my own
Totally.
core values. So these,
Totally though. Yeah.
right? And so if you can follow that, again, that can lead you to um some more, a new identity that it will fit for a while, and like
Big
you try
time.
that on and you're like, this feels good, I'm gonna chill on this plateau until you start climbing again.
Yeah, man. And it's sort of no different than trying on different tools. Like sort of we talked about at the beginning of the or somewhere in the middle of this conversation we talked about, different things that you can do to to make yourself feel good, to practice spirituality, let's say. And it's like just like we try out, do different activities, we can try on different sort of senses of identity, which will contribute to the sense of self as it needs to help us survive and navigate our reality at that moment, right? Like, again, there's nothing negative about this. So yeah, it's a really fascinating conversation. We really chose a massive topic that could probably go on for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
I'd love to touch on a little bit of the science, just because we promised people we would. And then maybe we can list some thoughts around like different things that people can try. And again, anyone listening, please enter your thoughts, your questions that you have. Anytime I ask Mischaela a question, feel free to answer it as well from your perspective. We do not have the answers. We are just on this journey of the unknown like everyone else. Ike chimed in and said, when we kind of got into mindfulness a bit, which is something I wanted to bring up in the science sort of section here, is he says, I think mindfulness can cure and alleviate a lot of things. When you can observe your ego or your feelings, this allows you to compare them to your standard versus the moment of experience. He says, sorry, I'm just going to scroll up. He goes, you can, sorry, then you can slow yourself down and get back to your standard, that you have deviated from it because of your ego. And like, just to clarify, when you say standard, do you mean sort of like your core essence, like your sense of stoicism, your base self?
Foundation.
Yeah, just so I understand correctly what you're saying, because I don't want to assume what you're saying. But I think, largely I can agree with mindfulness is very useful, and we'll talk scientifically about why that's true. And to Mischaela's point earlier, creating a healthy ego is being able to separate from it and observe it. And mindfulness is an incredible tool to create awareness and observe, especially the ego. So yeah, like super agree with you there. Ike says, Ryan says, you are exactly who you are looking for. Love that. And yeah, Ike, just some of the last comments, I kind of forget what they might be pertaining to because you're probably commenting along the way. So if I've missed anything, just let me know. And yeah, let me know what you meant by standard so that we can, in case we misunderstood what you said, because we're assuming that what you're saying is like mindfulness can help you recenter and reground yourself to your base. And then you can kind of approach life, through your identity, as it were, and the way you need to from there, which might actually make you more grounded, whether you're using a sense of identity or a role or not. If that's, yeah, cool. Whatever your standard is for you, he said. So yeah, I think we understood that correctly. Anything you want to add to that before we get into some science?
Let's get into some science.
Okay, love it. So science can be its own spiritual practice. We literally said that earlier. I was saying how, like, when I study anatomy, it's sort of just like who came up with this. There's just the cell biology and the intricacies of every single part of the human body alone is just unbelievable. It's like the more I study that, the more I'm like, I believe in God. Like how can humans, I don't know, we just didn't come up with that. Like some higher power had to have.
Maybe it was the aliens.
It's possible. I mean, anything's possible.
That's a conversation for another
yeah, another day. We'll do a podcast on psilocybin, and we can get into that. So it's like, okay, here it is. Where is it? I just wanted to sort of connect to, some of the thoughts I had wrote down earlier. So mindfulness from like a historical standpoint was practiced by religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and less commonly known, like commercially, let's say in the wellness field, was actually Judaism and Christianity and Islam as well. So mindfulness is actually, it's really well practiced in a lot of different places, especially in the East, and it's been practiced for thousands of years. In the 70s, it became more well known in the Western world when a professor named John Kabat-Zinn studied under Zen Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, who is one of the most influential sort of persons in Zen Buddhism. And John then paired mindfulness, his mindfulness practice that he learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, and he integrated that with Western science, and therefore mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, was born and became super prevalent in the West. And we've sort of taken that and taken it in all kinds of different directions. The reason I bring that up in terms of like how historical mindfulness is because at one time people thought that mindfulness was woo-woo. As Mischaela and I were talking before, people thought that, well, there's no scientific evidence, so it's pseudoscience, basically, or like there's no point in sort of investigating it because it's not sort of what we do here. And obviously this is sort of a Western perspective that, they understood the value well and good in these Eastern traditions. And these meditators who have been meditating for thousands of years have understood the value for a long time, and science is now catching up. And we've been able to uncover that from literal studies. This is physical matter that we're observing. We're discovering that gray matter in the brain, in the cortex, the structure of it is becoming more plastic. The amygdala, as we mentioned on this chat, which is the center that senses danger, decreases in size, and produces, allows people to be less stressed out and emotionally regulate and have more compassion, and even attention is increased. This is all through the practice of mindfulness and the studies of mindfulness. So it's to say that, like, just because something isn't scientifically disproven, and therefore categorized, just because something isn't disprovable, I should say, and therefore categorized as science, doesn't mean that it's not valuable, and doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. So yeah, I want to say that much about science because we're super excited to chat about it too.
Yeah. Are you handing it over?
Yes.
Sorry, I was just looking in the chat as well. I said this is a tequila conversation.
Yeah, the alien one for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Specifically, I mean, fair. Again, like I'm not I'm not in university for this right now.
Fair enough.
But
I mean, we could even summarize it by just saying, like, I like science, believe in science, and study science, and I'm spiritual. Therefore, it is true that these two things can coexist. Like, spirituality and science do not have to be mutually exclusive. They're already not mutually exclusive, just based on where we're at today with, let's just say, the practice of mindfulness. And not only that, just if you have any questions about, is there a higher power, go ahead and study the anatomy of the vagina, right down to the cell biology.
And you will believe in God.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long since my deep dive into, all of this. And since then, I've been focused on more like mindset and coaching and learning how to build a business and right? So I've actually, hence, what led us to this conversation was the fact that I've gotten so far away from spirituality and all of that exploration and seeking, because I was like, all right, I know that I got to change my life and do different things. And so then I started focusing on changing my life and doing different things, right? Which was, and now it's coming back to, like, I need to reconnect with my spirituality. And I guess that's sort of leads into the final segment of like, how do I do that? And what does that look like for me? And some things that I find have been, well, initially yoga, right? Like just getting in my body. Like the first time I really felt like the bliss of meditation was in a yoga class where I was like, this is it, right? And then like you pop out. I was
Right.
like, damn it. But like I was, yeah, it was like, all right, a beautiful yoga class, and then finished with a meditation. She had us all sit for like 15 minutes and instead of laying in shavasana, and I was, just breathing. I was like, fuck, it feels good to be alive. Like, god damn, every cell in my body is tingling, and there's no tension or heaviness, and everything just feels light and open and spacious, and I could just sit here forever and just breathe, and it would be just the most glorious existence I could imagine, right? And I have not experienced that often since, like in a long sustained way, because that stayed with me almost through the rest of the night. Like I kept being able to reconnect with that feeling. Um, and so, but that was like that's like the North Star for me, is like, all right, what helps me get to that place of connection and just no mind, and just like just glorying in the analogy I always use is like our body we have such a capacity to feel so fucking good, but it often requires contrast to feel it. Like if you're standing outside in the cold and it's raining and you're soaked and miserable, and then you go inside and you have
That's
a hot
fair.
shower and you crawl into bed and you put dry clothes on, you're just like, oh, like,
Right.
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 It's like you had to have the rain to feel like the dry warmth, like the joy of that. So
That's fair.
I'm always sort of,
That's fair.
right. So I'm always trying to, but you don't need the rain to feel that. You can just feel that. Like
That's right.
nothing has changed. Like so, um, for me, what helps is meditation, which doesn't always often doesn't bring me to that place, but at least gets me by the end of like a 20-minute session, once 15 minutes of my mind yammering away like settles down, like those last 5 minutes are really nice, when I'm just like, okay, I'm just feeling my body. I feel lighter. I feel open. I feel more spacious. Sound really, for me, is something that's really powerful. So I'll put on binaural beats, or even just music like that I like, right? Or here in Halifax.
Hmm. I have a feeling and a suspicion that her phone just died. It's very possible that that happened. But if she joins back in the last couple minutes here to say goodbye, then I will definitely let her back in if she can still hear me. Oh, there she is.
I don't know what happened. It just cut me off.
I thought I thought your phone might have died. So I was like, oh, maybe this is it.
Nope, I was here, hands
But you're
off,
back.
phone still going, but just jumped me out.
All good.
So here in Halifax, there is something that the gong baths. So like, or working with singing balls, but a gong bath where it's like these two people are playing 9 gongs, and just the resonance, like the vibration of the sound moving through you is just like, oh, it just
Right.
feels so good.
Right.
Movement, dance, like I do, like I like to do like just free flowing stretch dance yoga, like put some tunes on and just do what feels good, like what you were talking about. Just anything that kind of helps me get out of my head and into my body and
Right.
into my senses, and to just like experiencing the present moment.
Yeah. Love all of that.
Nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ugh, nature for
Nature.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's anyone that in the final couple minutes here, if there's anyone that wants to include, what they do to practice spirituality and things that they've found useful, final words are up for grabs. Yeah, I basically loved everything you just said. And I can resonate with all of it. I mean, there's substantial evidence for how sound affects our nervous system, our immune system, our mood, and our
Just
and change,
vibrates our cells.
yeah, and changes our brainwaves. So it's I'm not surprised by sound, and obviously as a singer, I deploy music and use that as a literal tool to change my mood on a regular basis. Movement, same. Dance, same. Meditation, same. And there's multiple different types of meditation, by the way, everyone. It doesn't just have to be mindfulness. But I did want to mention, as something that came up as you were talking that through, is that, and I know you know this, but just in case anyone else misunderstood, like the goal of meditation isn't necessarily to feel blissful. It's to give us information, collect data so we can make the changes we need to make, so that hopefully we can feel blissful, you know, or hopefully we can at very least mitigate suffering. Meditation is, you know, it's a spiritual, like spiritual practices don't mean how do I feel good all the time. That's not the goal. Spiritual practices mean how do I grow and how do I grow beyond myself? And that's obviously going to be uncomfortable and scary and upsetting. And we have to be gentle with ourselves. And we do have to take breaks. Aside from the fact that I said don't rest in conclusions, totally different things. One thing that I wanted to include in a spiritual practice, and I think that, you know, this is something that everyone can do. For me, it's songwriting. But even just free flow journaling, there's something about that that's so, it's similar to sort of that, you know, dancing in the woods by yourself. There doesn't need to be any inhibitions because there's no one watching. There's no one judging. You can throw it out at the end. Like you're just connecting to a stream of consciousness. And I feel that for me, oftentimes it might start out dark or more ego-centered, and then it just sort of transcends. My writing pieces just sort of transcend into something that's maybe coming from like a higher place. And I really connect to my own inner wisdom or a divine inner wisdom or God, let's say, source energy. I connect so greatly with the act of writing. So, I mean, if people are, again, looking to expand their spiritual practices and toolkit or enhance it or start out, that is a way you can start out. Just if you're like, how do I talk to God or the universe? Try to put pen to paper, and literally pen to paper, not typing. See what happens.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Warren says, we eventually find what works for us. 100%, my friend. At least those who are questing, you know, if you're not questing, you're probably not going to find out what works for you. But, you know, all in all, everyone, you know, these are all just ideas that we're constructing. There's no one size fits all answer. There's no, you know, right or wrong way. We really want to stress that spirituality is a process of a personal, it's personal. You define what spirituality means to you, and anyone that tells you otherwise and claims they've cracked the code and that there's a right and wrong way is not, it's not real. So keep doing you. Mischaela, where can people find you?
So I have a channel here on YouTube, which has been put on pause, but it's coming back. So you can type my name in and find me there. And I have just different videos on overcoming self-sabotage, overcoming all the different ways that we can hold ourselves back and limit ourselves through our ego. I'm mostly active these days on Instagram. So that is at Mischaela Coaching. And yeah, I'm currently in the process of creating a program. So I want to be working with coaches. I feel like I'm honing in on this niche. I'm in a program myself to create a program. So stay tuned for more info on that. But just about helping people like really step into and claim their power and what it is that they want to do so that they can then serve others from that place of authenticity and you know, really identifying what is their facet of the disco ball, what's that perspective. But yeah, that's where you find me. And you can also join my mailing list to stay tuned on what's coming down the pipes. So right now I am still offering one-to-one coaching for the time being.
Awesome. You guys definitely check Mischaela out. And I'm gonna include all of the links in the YouTube description. So when that'll be posted as soon as this processes. And I think the Facebook one already has the link. So you can check her out that way. You don't have to remember the website links and stuff.
Yeah. MIS.
Yeah. I had to like triple check your, even still like 10 years after knowing you or whatever, I like had to triple check your name. I was like, did I like Miss Shay? No, there's like an A first.
There's a lot of letters in there.
Beautiful name though. Anyway, my friend, I don't want to keep you because you probably have to get back to your life. This has been an amazing conversation, totally expansive for me and probably one that could go on forever. Thanks everyone for showing up. It's been amazing. You can also check my credentials, not credentials, my websites and where to find me in the links if you're new to this stream. Anyone streaming live on YouTube, you can find all my links in the caption and see what I'm about. Reach out to me through DMs on Instagram anytime. And we love you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.